Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday, joined by Dave Wanstedt and Joshua Perry. I am Dave Revson. Juan, are you still basking in the glow of the backyard brawl win?
We had them all the way.
Yeah, that game was in the bag the entire time. Yeah,
About like half of these
never a
games.
moment of doubt. Yeah.
That interception with a minute and a half left was just how it was scripted up. I was in there. I heard
The replay review, that if it had gone the other way, you would have lost the game.
I heard Pat Narduzzi saying this is how it's going to finish.
All right.
It's exciting. I mean, you start off with the Thursday games, exciting weekend all the way up through. And I was watching yesterday and everything, and this is what we waited for, get college football back.
Yep.
And I know a lot of us, like myself, are sick. We watch too much college football over the weekends, but I wouldn't rather have it any other way.
Yeah, I don't think there's such a thing. And that is the beauty of week one, right? You start watching on Thursday,
Yes.
and you are not done until late at night on Monday.
Yep.
There are games pretty much going nonstop without any competition from the NFL. And a lot of intriguing results in week one. Plenty to talk about from the Big Ten point of view. That is our big story. Ohio State's win over Notre Dame, obviously the biggest game, not just in the Big Ten over the weekend, but a top five battle, the biggest game in all of college football. We did have two conference games in addition to the one played in week 0. Penn State and Indiana both putting together late drives to win their games, had a couple shutouts, and Michigan winning in a blowout. We'll touch on all of those as we go along. I want to start with Penn State, Wani, and I know you do too. Thursday night, let's not understate how difficult that setup was for them. Going into Purdue, the blackout conditions, people are really fired up about that Boilermaker team. Penn State once again opening on the road, 12th time in 13 years in conference play. They find themselves down late in the game and figured out a way. What stood out to you?
They did. The thing, you're right, all those points are legit. In fact, I thought the game was a toss-up. And at the end of the day, the recruiting, and I'm going to take this a little different way, the recruiting that James Franklin, the outstanding recruiting that James Franklin has done up there, to me, made a difference in the game. In that last game-winning drive, it was missed tackles. I think they had 140, 150 yards. Purdue did in missed tackles that Penn State just made the plays to make that. So, it was a great win for Penn State. Sean Clifford, I thought, was a little bit inconsistent, as were both quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. But then he got it in, scored, 5 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 4 throwing. But at the end of the day, one team really couldn't run the ball and close it out, in my opinion, Penn State. They tried. Again, they did not have 100 yards rushing, right? And Purdue had a chance with the lead to close the game out, and they refused to run the ball. So I know I'm coming back to old school football, Joshua, but that's a fact.
But it does show you the value of the run game, right? Because I do think it gets so overshadowed in this day and age. But at the end of the day, if you can't run the ball to salt a game away, you have a hard time winning.
I'm with you. And I'm one of those guys who says, well, they're so good at throwing the football, I can understand why their mentality and why balance looks different for Purdue. But to not attempt to run the ball in that situation, regardless of if you actually get the yardage, you're talking about making the other team call timeouts, or you're talking about time running off of the clock, game management here in a 4-minute situation at the end of the game. That was shocking to me. I want to touch on the missed tackles because I think this is a global issue in college football right now with the way that training camp is set up. A lot of the games that I watched over the weekend feel like tackling has been a real problem. And it's going to get better as the season goes on because players are going to get more live game reps. But that really did hurt Purdue. And it seems like the more tired you get toward the end of the game, the harder it is to get back to a fundamental you haven't really worked on. And that really it hurt them.
Made a difference.
Penn State 206 yards after the catch. So to both of your guys' points, I'm interested, though, you say they're not working on it. Help people understand why, because I do think this is really important.
In practice nowadays, you can't run 2 a day. So start right there. It's just less reps that you get. But you're trying to take contact off of players. You can't be padded all the time. You can't tackle to the ground all the time because you're trying to save your players for a stretch run throughout the season and take reps off of them. You see coaches try to simulate tackling in drill work where they'll do either the first half of the tackle or the back half of the tackle maybe onto a crash pad. but you're not really getting that full feel of a tackle. And so when I talk to coaches nowadays, one of the things that they tell me is all of the fundamentals up to the point of contact. So your feet, your body posture, running your feet after you make contact, your hips just not going to the ground, and then angles. Finish to the football, because a lot of tackling is having a proper angle. And when your angle's bad, then your leverage is off. That's when you start to see the cutbacks. That's when you start to see the arm tackles. But it's difficult because you don't get to actually work on the skill.
Right. And, one point, we're talking tackling, we're talking running the ball with both these teams. We're going to talk about it throughout the show, throughout the year. When I first got my head coaching job at the Bears, Bill Parcells said, "Who are you going to hire as your offensive coordinator?" And I gave him a list of some guys, and he says, "Well, keep in mind, all these guys are going to tell you they want to run the ball, but very few of them believe in running it or understand in running it. So you can't tell me that Penn State or Purdue or any school in the Big Ten doesn't have good enough people to run the ball if you make a commitment. So it's either they don't want to run it or they really don't understand the importance and how they want to go about it. It falls into one of those categories. People don't like hearing it, but that's the facts of everything.
Eighth time in the last 14 games, to your point, Penn State's had fewer than 100 rushing yards. Obviously, Purdue unable to run the game to close it out as well. But Penn State does get a huge win.
Absolutely.
A win that will resonate
great win.
throughout
Great
the
win.
season for sure for them under difficult circumstances.
And I do want to say this about the end of that game as well. Sean Clifford, if you opened up the Twitter app during the game, threw an interception. A lot of people weren't satisfied with his play. You go down at the end of the game and you lead a game-winning drive. That's why he's the starting quarterback at Penn State. The dude has guts. He's got grit. He's a veteran guy who just knows how to get it done.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a team that did run it well, Ohio State.
Yeah.
And not only ran it well, but was committed to the run. I mean, Joshua, they ran 20 plays in the fourth quarter. All but 4 of them were run plays against Notre Dame. What did you take away, not just from the fact that Ohio State did win, but the manner in which they won?
I think it was a little bit of a tale of two halves for Ohio State, where early on in the game, it looked like a team that had maybe read their press clippings during the offseason. I don't say that to be derogatory or disparage those guys, because I've been in similar type of locker room situations. I was reading my press clippings, and then you feel resistance. We talked about it a week ago. I said Notre Dame was going to provide them resistance that they probably weren't used to seeing or didn't think they would feel early on in the year. And so at halftime, things are a little tenuous. You come out defensively, shut out in the second half. You give up almost nothing. Really good performance there. Haven't seen Ohio State play like that on defense in a very long time. Offensively, in these situations, the criticism had been Ohio State's offensive line wasn't getting the push. The running backs weren't doing a good job of getting the tough yards, or even that the play calling philosophy didn't give enough love to the run game. And to your point, Dave, it was a total opposite. You go down there, the offensive linemen are getting pushed, changing the line of scrimmage. Mayan Williams at running back, you put your big back in there, let him get downhill and run right through people. And you call the run plays that you need. I thought this was a big mentality shift for Ohio State, both offensively with the toughness in the trenches, and then overall on defense. Going out and being able to get a shutout in the second half of a game like that, I think is impressive.
Yeah, you got to give Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, a lot of credit, because it does take you, like Joshua said, players and coaches too. There's no preseason games, so it's taken him a feel, up in the press box and the communication with the guys on the sideline, and then you're getting the calls out to the players. This was all new when the lights come on. And so for them to adjust 2.5 quarters and shut out Notre Dame, I'll tell you what, it's a great job at halftime on the entire staff. And it's a good win, and it's a great start for Jim Knowles.
Yeah, I think the response was impressive, too, because remember, Notre Dame gashed them on the first play.
They did.
Yep. And so there's kind of that feeling of, here we go again.
Yeah.
Right?
I totally agree with that. And I think the best thing for this Ohio State team was that exact thing happening. I think playing a really good team the first week of the season, the first half being a struggle. Yep. So you have to make the adjustments that you probably don't have to make early on in the year. You feel those hits that you don't typically feel early on in the year, and it sets the tone that if you can get a tough win in that type of environment against that team, then the rest of the year, if you continue to build, you can live up to that preseason building.
Absolutely.
You think about the areas where they struggled last year, getting off the field on third down. They were next to worst in the Big Ten last season. 3 of 13 for Notre Dame. So kind of really,
that's great.
Yeah, no, completely flipping the script. What about Michigan? We have to talk about the defending Big Ten champs. It was a complete domination, and yet it still feels like, Wani, I mean, I'm fascinated from your point of view as a head coach.
Well,
this quarterback.
No, wait a minute. Think about the head coaches you want me to talk about.
Yes.
I know Jim. I talked to him. Hasn't talked in the last week or two, but got to coaching him. Okay, I coached him, so
Right.
I know Jim.
I know.
I still don't figure Jim out. Okay,
But what a tough spot.
I love
He's
him.
in a tough spot.
No, he's not. No,
Why
he's
is he not in a tough
I'd
spot?
go with Cade, and then you got to bring in, make the adjustment. During the course of the game and get him some plays. I'm telling you, your starting quarterback needs more reps. He needs that voice. He's the voice of the team. I don't know how you do it when you're rotating guys like this and expect to really pull it together, because I promise you right now, if you went around that locker room and you would say, who do you think is the best? Who do you think is the best? There's going to be different opinions. I don't like that as a head coach. This is our guy. Now, you're going to play him like you did last year, or the other thing. Okay, let's get right down to it. If you want to bench the kid, then bench him and put the other guy in. Forget about it.
I'm kind of with Wani here, like rip the Band-Aid off.
What are we doing?
It feels weird. And this is why I say that. Is Cade McNamara was voted a captain by his peers.
Yep.
And he goes out and he's in a game situation that he probably didn't expect himself to be in throughout training camp, where he's got somebody else right behind him that he knows he's still competing for a starting job with. Probably is not good for the psyche. We don't talk about psychology enough when it comes to sports. And he goes out and has a pretty lackluster performance. He watches J.J. McCarthy get in there, 20-yard scamper to the end zone.
4 for 4, right?
Something he can't do. Just be electric like that with his legs, even though he can go out and win games and be a champion, which we've seen him do. And then he goes into the post game and talks about how, well, it's out of my hands at this point, and felt a little blindsided and didn't really expect all this coming, but I'm just gonna keep fighting like I've done my whole career. That right there, to me, can become problematic, because that is one of your captains, and you can tell that he feels like he's not getting the respect that he believes he earned. You have to stop that right now. Yeah. Direct conversation needs to be had with everybody involved in that situation, so you can make sure they're all still aligned in the same direction. And that's my one thing.
I hope that this is not a case of trying to keep a kid happy so he doesn't transfer. You know what I mean?
But that's the reality.
But the reality is, when we were, and I'm dating myself, but when we were at Miami, we told Vinny Testaverde, you're going to you're going to play and be a 2-year starter when Bernie Kosar leaves. And Vinny won the Heisman. And then we told Steve Walsh that, and Steve Walsh was a #1 draft pick. I mean,
it's interesting.
Why can't you just, I don't know.
You could probably talk about this better than I ever could. I haven't been a coach, but a lot of coaches I talk to say that the most difficult part of the job at the professional level is managing personalities. And I think one of the more difficult parts of the job at the college level, collegiate level right now, is managing personalities. Because you got 2 guys, same amount of eligibility left. That's a little bit of an issue, but I think clarity clears up a lot of the problems for players. The one thing I only ever wanted clarity from my coaches. If you thought I was terrible, tell me I stink. If you think there's something I need to work on, let me know that. Am I going to play or am I not going to play? Who's the starter? Just give me some clarity, and I think a lot of the issues go away.
When Jim was the head coach of the 49ers, and we played him, when they went to the Super Bowl, he played 2 quarterbacks. Help me out here. Kaepernick was one, and who was the other guy?
Alex Smith.
Alex Smith. But Alex Smith was a starter, and everybody knew he was a starter, and Kaepernick came in like JJ did, and he ran plays and was a big part of the offense. They did that all the way through to the Super Bowl. So, Jim, this is not his first rodeo going through this.
I hear you, but Alex Smith couldn't pick up and leave. It's just different.
Well, but we see what guys are doing. I mean, guys in the league, if they want to force it.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying, it's much more complex.
It is. But before we get off of this, I do want to make sure I say this.
I assure you, we'll have plenty more opportunities.
The Michigan defense
fabulous.
Oh my gosh. And I tried to tell people, I thought it was going to be really good again this year. And it looks like it's going to be really good.
And the running game.
Yeah.
The running game.
I mean,
They're really, like,
this
they're
is- it's a-
really good.
it's a good
right?
football
They're
team.
really good. Yeah. One more look at week 1 in the Big Ten. It started Thursday with Penn State's come-from-behind win that we were talking about at Purdue. Indiana scoring in the final minutes atop Illinois Friday. Those were the 2 conference games. As for the non-conference, Big Ten was undefeated in those games, including Rutgers going on the road to top BC and Iowa narrowly surviving against South Dakota State. Wani, how about Indiana? Let's discuss them a little bit. I mean, they were in a tough spot when you think about it, right? Illinois had already played a game.
Right.
So Illinois kind of, you always talk about that improvement week 1 to week 2, right? So you have Illinois in a position to do that.
Right.
Indiana, coming off the winless season a year ago, they have a new offensive coordinator. They've got Tom Allen in this new role as defensive coordinator. They have a ton of transfers on this roster, and you got to figure out a way to put it together in a conference game, and yet they did, and won the game despite not being able to run the ball.
Yeah, they did 13 transfers, you're right. Second most in the conference behind Nebraska. I got to believe, and it was a great win. And the reason they won the game, in my opinion, they didn't outplay Illinois, but the effort and the focus and the energy level, probably they sustained it the entire game, and Illinois, for whatever reason, kind of lost it at the end. So I'm going to give Tom Allen credit for that. His football team was ready to play, and I think they gave the effort, obviously, that they needed to win it, and they made that play at the end. I can't believe that this is Tom, being a defensive guy, throwing it, having 53 passing attempts and not being able to run the ball. Yeah. That is not a formula for success, in my opinion, anywhere in the country. Then alone with Tom Allen being a defensive-minded coach. Now, whether they can change that or not, I don't know. But philosophy-wise, you're going to come up short. You're not going to be able to score. You're going to turn the ball over. You're going to make more mistakes. They just ran into a team in Illinois. If I'm Brent Bielema, I am so frustrated because you say, what do we want to do, guys? We want to run the ball. They ran the ball, right? What do we want to do, guys? We want to hold on to the ball, keep our defense fresh. 36 minutes of possession time, Illinois.
Yeah, but 4 turnovers, right?
Yeah. The 4 turnovers. Yeah. That's it. And at the end of the day, I used to have assistant coaches sitting there telling me just what I said, all these stats. And I said, guys, 4 turnovers, 1 turnover. Forget about that. Who do you think won the game? Yep. The team with 1, so that's what lost the game for them. They'll get that corrected. But I think Illinois, I know what their identity is. You know what I mean? When you look at that team, they got to clean up the turnovers because they'll lose. I mean, I get that part. But they came out 2 weeks in a row and they've been consistent at what they want to do. I think they can build on this.
I thought the turnovers were shocking because, and Dave, we watched them.
Biggest point of emphasis when we were there, right? Ball security.
One of the most well-coached teams that we watch, and it's a huge point of emphasis. They spend more time than anybody that we watch, and I know practice plans change from day to day on that part of the football game. But you also look, and I know that they're going to be upset. There's a questionable call in there. Rats, you can't get that one. That's a part of the game, but the 4th down where they decide to go for the touchdown instead of kicking. I'm a go-for-it guy, so I'm totally with it. Those are the types of things that I know Coach Bielema is going to look back at and say, okay, maybe how do we change our philosophies with that? All that to say, they're going to look at this game and say there's so many opportunities where we could have won the football game, but we didn't. And then for Indiana, I think a couple of things stand out. The quarterback position, not necessarily the most efficient, but a guy who can throw the football around, and especially when you struggle to run it, that's what you need. Great for them. I think that their defense tried to be extremely aggressive, getting guys in the back end in some situations where they were on tight coverage, letting those guys go up front. I think you have to continue to build that. But when we talk about the run game, personnel-wise on the offensive line, they are who they are. And I thought in certain situations they could have been better at executing the scheme. But the personnel is what it is. When you look at the running back position, I think Shivers is a guy who needs space to operate. He's not just going to run into the middle of the defense and run guys over. And so you have to have answers for that, whether that's getting the ball out on the edges, I don't know how you try to attack the teeth of a defense when you're built like that, but that's going to be the main thing for this team. They're going to have to find some balance.
And they did go 75 yards
yep.
and to win the game.
Yep.
So again, that's that mentality. I think that's the best thing that Tom Allen. Right now, I say, boy, your team never quit. They were focused at the end. They fought them to the end, and they found a way to win the game.
And I don't think that surprises any of us,
At
given
all.
kind of the DNA of
100%.
Tom Allen and what he's trying to infuse into that program. I mean, that's kind of what they're all about. Speaking of what you're all about, Greg Schiano wants to run the ball.
Yeah, he does.
Wants to stop the run, wants to be tough on both lines of scrimmage. How about going into Boston College, a solid ACC team,
Yes.
digging yourself a little bit of a hole, digging out of it, and winning the game late? That was a huge. I just don't think you can overstate how big that win was for Rutgers.
I totally agree with you on that. You talk about running the football. I wasn't exactly sure leaving training camp that I thought they were going to be a heavy downhill, run the football team. That offensive line is going to be the difference maker for Rutgers. They'll go as far as that offensive line can take them. And they ran the ball effectively, which is something that you need to do when you go on the road, especially early on in the season, stopping the run. I expected this defense to be able to make plays in the back end. I think that their secondary is going to be up there with some of the other really good secondaries in this conference. Again, the question becomes, on your defensive line, do you maybe have the personnel? Can you put the guys in the position to be successful? They did it. But I was talking to a friend of mine who I played ball against once upon a time, and they told me when you win a game by 1 point, like Rutgers did, it was because you wanted it more, simply.
Yeah.
And I think that tough mentality is something that we all could have anticipated coming from this Rutgers squad.
Yeah, +2 in turnover margin. I mean, Greg Schiano he's going to be tough to beat because he's going to win the turnover battle more times than not. And, then it just comes down to personnel, really. But, no, outstanding win. I mean, they're going to do what they have to do. Greg's not going to get out-coached. I mean, and I'm partial to him because, of our relationship. But the guy is good. He's really good. Just a matter of talent.
There's one thing that we say, leaving camp, talking to him, spending time watching them practice. They can steal games based off of coaching and based off of toughness. Mm-hmm. Those are two things that they have. And Greg does a phenomenal job, but his players are all gritty guys.
Yeah.
11-game skid against BC ended first time they'd beaten them since 1991. Now you got Wagner and Temple in a great spot to be 3-0. And given how difficult, given how difficult their conference slate is, they really need three wins as you try to figure out a way to count to 6, get to a bowl for a second straight year, and start to build some momentum inside that program. It is time for our big stat, or in this case, our big stats. Too many to choose just one from Ohio State's win over Notre Dame. A Buckeyes D that yielded more than 40 points in consecutive outings at the end of last year. For the first time ever, gave up just 10 against the Irish, holding them to 253 total yards. A unit that didn't have a single tackle for loss in the Michigan game last year came up with 6, half of them from linebacker Tommy Eichenberg, who joins us now. Tommy Eichenberg is today's big interview. And Tommy, there had been a lot of criticism of this defense after last season. What did it mean to you guys to play as well as you did right out of the gate against Notre Dame?
It meant a lot, just all off season, working, to be the best defense that we can, and we were excited to show everyone.
How much do you talk about last year's struggles, or how much did you talk about last year's struggles in the offseason as a way of motivating yourselves for this year?
It was brought up a lot. It was brought up just because, it was on everyone's mind. We kind of let the team down, but we also knew that it was a new chapter, and that we can fix things. So.
Well, one of the first steps in fixing things was the hiring of Jim Knowles, and it's pretty clear just from watching one game, he's made a difference. Describe his teaching style to me.
Coach Knowles is great. Every meeting he starts off is that he's there to teach and we're there to learn. And so he sees the game from a different perspective. than players. And he's very smart, and we all respect him, and everything that he says, we listen. So.
This is a pretty big game for you, not just because it was the season opener, but also because I know your brother Liam played at Notre Dame. To what extent, if any, was there trash talking back and forth between the two of you, either before or after the game?
He did a little bit in the summer, but nothing crazy. But after the game, we just talked. He just said good game. And that's about it. So.
Nothing? You're not going to hang it over his head at all, or any kind of family bet, anything like that going on?
No, he's just just happy to see it. Happy to see us do well. So.
To me, your season, I would say, really began with last year's Rose Bowl. You got the start, and it was kind of your coming out party. You had 17 tackles in that game. In what way did that prove to you that you could be not just a player at this level, but a really good player at this level?
Yeah, I think that game was important. Just boost my confidence, and just allowed for me to believe in myself and believe in the guys that I go out there and playing with, and it really just gelled the whole defense together too.
It's interesting because you were a starter at the beginning of last year, and then you lost that starting job. In what ways did that motivate you during the course of the year to kind of reclaim that position on the defense?
Yeah, lost the starting job, but just try to stay in it. Still got reps and stuff in the game. Try to get experience too throughout every game, and just showed up to practice every day, just trying to get better, and just keep stacking days.
Well, clearly you have, and not only is it evident from the stats, but it's evident from the way that your teammates view you. You were named one of the captains of this team. What's your leadership style, Tommy?
I'd say, I lead by example, but I'm also vocal too. I like bringing guys up, encouraging guys, being excited, every day to go out there and get better. It's just an honor to be named captain. So.
We were talking about Jim Knowles earlier. He refers to you as a serious dude. I can see that from talking to you, why he might say that, but what do you do for fun?
I do a lot of things for fun. Eat food or hang out with my friends. Read a book or something. I'm a fun guy.
What are you reading these days?
I read a lot of things. I'm reading Junction Boys. It's with Bear Bryant back in the 50s when they took Texas A&M down to Junction, Texas for training camp.
Yeah, really an amazing story. It was made into a great movie as well a number of years ago. How would you contrast what it might have been like to play for Bear Bryant versus what it's like to play for Ryan Day?
I'd say it's a little bit harder to play for Bear Bryant. Practice is pretty tough, I'd say.
It's interesting. I know your mom is an educator, and one of the things that she encourages her students to do is to write down some goals. It can be really simple, but just at the beginning of each academic term, hey, what are you trying to achieve? And you wrote on your wall in pencil as a kid that you wanted to be a scholarship player at Ohio State, and it took a long time to get to that point. Describe the recruitment process for us when you finally got that opportunity.
Yeah, I was committed to Boston College back in high school, my junior year, and the offers from Ohio State didn't come till later. But once that happened, I was going there no matter what, and it's okay. Like, you get an offer, but you still got a long way to go. So, it was great. It was cool.
You were the last to commit in this recruiting class. What did it mean to you, particularly as someone who is from Ohio, to be a part of Ryan Day's first class?
It meant everything. I told him, he called me after he said he got the new job, and I was like, yeah, I'm coming no matter what. I believe in you, I trust in you. So it is awesome.
Well, I know Buckeye fans are grateful for your play last week. Give me a quick scouting report. I know you're a big X and O guy. What should we expect against Arkansas State, a game we have here on the Big Ten Network?
Yeah, I'd say defense is going to do their thing. Watched a few cut-ups, but I got to meet with the defense. But I'm excited. It'll be good.
We are excited to watch you play. Tommy Eichenberg, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to talk to us. Really appreciate it, and continued success to you and your teammates.
Yep, thank you.
Big Ten Players of the Week, Anthony Grant and Sean Clifford sharing it on the offensive end. Grant already making a huge impact at Nebraska, 290 rushing yards combined in his first 2 games as a Husker. That's the most ever. Clifford led that huge game-winning drive we were talking about. UNLV transfer Jacoby Windman, 4 sacks against Western Michigan, tied for the second most in school history. Torrey Taylor pretty much won the game for Iowa, 10 punts, including 2 that led directly to safeties. And Roman Hemby shining in his first career start for Maryland. Joshua, it is tough to win that award when your team does not win the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that is probably the one thing that kept Charlie Jones from doing it.
Charlie Jones wanted to go to Purdue for the offense, and he goes right in, right away makes an impact for that team. And the big question that we asked all offseason long was who was going to fill in at wide receiver. David Bell's not there. And, they have a long lineage. Aiden O'Connell needs somebody to throw the ball to. Enter Charlie Jones. 12 receptions, 153 yards. Let me take you back to last year at Iowa. He had 21 receptions and 323 yards on the season last year. He is a very productive player. We know the connection that Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones have from their childhood, but you watch him attack at different parts of the football field, and I think that's where he's going to be a dangerous threat. He can be an underneath guy. You can hit him in the intermediate, and he can also get behind your defense on some of those schemed-up shot plays, and that's what I'm excited to see out of him this year.
19 targets for a guy who caught 21 passes.
It's ridiculous.
19 targets in one game. No, it's clear he's going to make a major impact in this Purdue offense. And Jeff Brom told us as much when we were at camp. He's really excited about him. I mentioned Windman earlier. Mel Tucker continues to really clean up in the portal.
Well, it does, yeah. He's a transfer in from UNLV, and we talked about the 4 sacks in the introduction, but he had 7 tackles, forced a fumble, which tells me that he can play the run and the pass. He's just not a pass rush specialist. And when you looked at Michigan State's team going back a year ago, the biggest hole, the biggest thing that they had to fix was that pass defense. Mm-hmm. And Coach Tucker himself has been working with the secondary, trying to work on that back end, and nothing helps a secondary and this, Joshua, as faster and more than a good pass rush. So this is critical that he continues doing this and he gets some more help to help that back end and eliminate those big pass plays, which they gave up a year ago.
Quarterbacks can't throw it from their back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to dig into a deep dive on Windman a little bit more because I want to see how he defends the run, but I did watch those rushes, and he has everything you'd want. Twitchy get off. He's got loose hips. He bends like Gumby. He's got violent hands.
Yep.
Everything that you would want your pass rusher to look like, this guy possesses. So he could be special.
It'll be more important now. Darius Snow, linebacker, unfortunately lost for the year, so that a pretty significant blow for them. We mentioned Sean Clifford leading a game-winning drive. Connor Bazelak did the same for Indiana. What stood out to you about a guy who was a former SEC Freshman of the Year?
He needed to go out there and be as productive yardage-wise as he ended up being in this game for Indiana to have success offensively. Connor Bazelak was a guy who I think the story's still being written on him. We know that he can throw it. He can pick up yards. One of the things that he has done in this past is turn the football over. He threw for too many interceptions the last time he was a starting quarterback, in my opinion. But you come out here and you can provide instantly an arm into an offense that was going to struggle to run the football to begin with. That is impactful. Now how do you continue to build off of this? And can he be a guy who you say maybe you got to run the ball twice a quarter just to take a little bit of pressure off of the tailback run game as well, open up some more of those lanes. I like what I saw, though.
Good. Yeah, I would agree with you. Just run the ball. I don't care how. If you can't make 5 yards a carry, make 1 yard a carry. That has an impact truly on how the defense plays, and it gives your quarterback a little relief.
Cleary's got some better weapons too. Cam Camper, the junior college transfer,
He's really
11
good.
receptions. He's really good. He looks the part, and he plays the part too. Some new faces there, but we also had some old reliables, including Mo Ibrahim. How heartwarming was this story after we saw him go down with the Achilles injury in the season opener a year ago?
Absolutely. And this is, when you say Minnesota football, the first thought that comes in my mind, physical, run the ball. And Mo's the heart and soul of this team. I know Tanner Morgan and the passing game and the receivers, and, they had top 10 defense last year, but make no mistake, if they can run the ball, if Mo obviously picks up where he left off. 21 carries, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a great start coming back. And now all of a sudden, we talk about running the ball in Indiana, taking some pressure off the quarterback. That's what this does here. This will give Tanner Morgan and company a chance for big pass plays. And I'll tell you what, that defense, the biggest concern, talking to P.J. Fleck, was that defensive front because of graduation. This will help the defense. It'll keep them rested. They won't have to play as many plays. Having Mo back and having him go full speed is really critical, in my opinion, to how far Minnesota can go.
Minnesota's defense didn't play very many plays in that last game, too. So, to your point, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you brought up something that I feel like needs to be said again. Mo Ibrahim is going to pull those safeties closer to the line of scrimmage. They're going to force you to play defenses where you feel like you have a man advantage in the box. And in this RPO system, and when it comes to taking shots, that's exactly what you want. Because then you get your one-on-one matchup, makes the read a lot clearer. You can take the shot down the field, or you can just dink and dunk if they're going to say we're going to load the box. I like it.
Yeah, if only they had an offensive coordinator who knew a thing or two about running the RPOs.
If only.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're in good shape there. You saw Nebraska in person. Who stood out individually for you?
It was Garrett Nelson, and you look at the stat line, 8 tackles and a sack. He was very effective, extremely disruptive, and the stats don't even really tell the full story because he would get penetration, really force the running back to have to make a drastic cut early on, force quarterback into a pressure situation. But the story doesn't stop there. There was a drive where that game was still sticky for Nebraska against North Dakota, and he runs out onto the football field, and he's got his arms in the air, and he's jumping up and down. And he was the only guy on the defense with that type of energy as they took the field. And I think he needs to make sure the other guys in the locker room follow that lead. He needs to do whatever he can to instill that into the rest of his teammates. He's a star in his play. I think his leadership ability can elevate the rest of this defense and knock out some of those woes that they've had as a team. That's the type of guy they need to follow.
He's a character,
is.
too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you could definitely see him being one of those guys who players rally behind.
Well, they trust him because he's a guy.
Yeah.
But they need to follow him now.
Right. Speaking of players you can trust, we would be remiss if we did not discuss Torrey Taylor.
Talk about old reliable. This is old reliable.
This is all reliable. Man, I mean, he basically won the game for them, right? And put them in position for the 2 safeties that did win them the game.
There's a coaching phrase, and I'm sure Joshua's heard it, you've heard it, Rever, the hidden yardage of football, right? And the hidden yardage of football, it's referring to special teams and primarily the kicking game. And think about this, what Torrey did, he had 7 punts inside the 20, he punted 10, 5 punts inside the 10, 3 punts inside the 5. I mean, what does that do? You might say, well, okay, number one, there's no punt return. They're not returning it back. Number 2, your defense is starting where you get them penned in there, and offensive coaches hate nothing more than starting at the 10-yard line. They're starting inside the 10-yard line, inside the 5-yard line. Now, all of a sudden, that playbook gets cut from there to here because they got to get a little more conservative. And then on top of it, when you got a defense like Iowa and you stop them, your offense is taking over the football at the 50-yard line, going in to get some points. Now, that didn't happen, But
Theoretically, you're saying.
but in my playbook, it happens. And this is great clinic talk. We're talking clinic right now.
Right.
That's what you tell the players, and it's because it's a fact. So the hidden yardage of football, the field position, I never thought I'd be talking this much about a punter, but I'll tell you, or a kicker, but I'll tell you what, I mean, he's my MVP in that win.
It's a huge advantage, and you mentioned this, but offenses aren't practicing those coming out situations nearly enough. The inventory and the reps do not exist for that. Gives you a big advantage to the defense because you pin the ears back and go.
Only one team in the country punted more than Iowa last year. Statistical watch, I know it's early. They lead the nation this year in punts per game at 10. I know we're only 1 week in. Everyone plays 14 games, 8 of which can be seen here on the Big Ten Network. We've got the Buckeyes early, the Cy-Hawk battle at 3:30 Eastern, the Wolverines in primetime. Should be a great day. In addition to the Hawkeyes, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Illinois all face Power 5 opponents. Joshua, what's got you intrigued here week 2?
Well, Michigan hosting Hawaii, the X's,
come on.
The X's and O's are not going to be intriguing. We talked about it. Vanderbilt won by 53 points. You got Hawaii. I think they're flying on a red eye to get to Michigan. This is a bad setup. This is not a good football team. I'm not trying to disparage those kids, but X's and O's don't line up. How do you make the decision on the quarterback? It's just the one thing that stands out in my mind. It just feels like it's not a level playing ground. I hope both of them get to play a similar amount of reps in this game just so you get to see it. But that's the one thing that we're going to be talking about until this decision is fully made. And it's not even guaranteed to be fully made after this week's over either. That's the other intriguing part.
The implication was when this thing was set up that we'll make a decision going into week 3,
we don't
right?
know, but if you don't have the information, you can't make the decision. Because this whole thing was about a bigger information gathering process.
Yeah, that's fascinating. To your point, Hawaii 0-2 got hammered by Vanderbilt and Western Kentucky. You were going to say?
The quickest way to be defeated is to be distracted.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Sounds like you coached once upon a time.
Well, it's an old military term.
What's the game that's got you most intrigued, Coach?
I want to see your Northwestern. I want to see the Cats. I want to see Fitz come out, and they came off a great victory. We know about it with, where they had offensive production like we haven't seen in a while against Nebraska, and now they're playing Duke. And Duke has made a total shift here from a philosophy standpoint. They got a new head coach this year, Mike Elko, who we're familiar with. At one time was at Notre Dame, defense coordinator. They hired him from Texas A&M, defensive coordinator. Now he's at Duke. And they got rid of David Cutcliffe, who was an offensive guy where they always scored points. They win last week 30-0 against Temple. So his defensive expertise obviously showed up on the field. The players just reading the clips, they're talking about a new young energy. So, Duke has had their number. I mean, Duke has won, I think, the last 3 times,
3
right?
in a row, including beating some good Northwestern teams.
Some good teams. So this won't be easy. No one said it's going to be, but I want to see Northwestern come out and let's go. Let's take another step. You've had a week off. You've been able to study these guys. Let's come in and let's win this football game and get 2-0.
Yeah, that shutout first since Steve Spurrier was the head coach at Duke. So it's been a long time. Where I think it gets really interesting, too, and I'd be interested in your guys' take on this. Kevin Johns is the offensive coordinator at Duke. He was on Fitz's staff for a long time. And then Adam Cushing was his offensive line coach forever. And he is Duke's offensive line coach now after a tough stint as the head coach at Eastern Illinois. So to what extent does that knowledge play in?
Well, there'll be, because Fitz hasn't changed. I mean, their philosophy hasn't changed since on defense, particularly since Coach Hankiewicz was there, carrying over to now. So they'll know, the basics about them. Obviously, it's going to come down to players. So it won't hurt. If anything, it'll be a little bit of an edge for them.
The psychology of the coach, too. And I think that makes as much of a difference as anything else. When he's going to want to take his chances, when he's going to want to pull back, and maybe you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah, should be a really interesting game. Looking forward to that one. We are looking forward to Wednesday on this show as well. We will reveal the women's basketball schedule in the Big Ten for this upcoming season. You'll want to check us out for that. We will see you tomorrow.